On April 30th, 1965, Life magazine ran this cover photo that you see here. The title reads, "Drama of Life Before Birth," and the subtitle explains, "Living 18-week-old fetus shown inside its amniotic sac." It's a beautiful picture, absolutely groundbreaking for the time. But something is missing. Surely that umbilical cord is leading off somewhere. Where in all of this is the pregnant female body? I'm a classics scholar, and as such, I study the language, literature, history, and culture of ancient Greece and Rome. In particular, in my dissertation, I'm focusing on childbirth and reproduction in the Roman Empire in the 1st through 4th centuries CE. When I first started researching for my dissertation, I was looking for pregnant women and childbirth within the literary and material culture of ancient Rome. And I kept coming up empty-handed. I was finding some evidence, but not as much as you might think, given how important these things are to the reproduction and continuation of the human race. So feeling frustrated, I did what I do when I feel frustrated. I started reading around in feminist theory and blog entries about reproductive justice, and I realized something. I realized that I was asking the wrong questions. And as every historian knows, what's most important when you're studying history is the questions that you ask. Here I was looking for pregnant women when what I really needed to be looking for was fetuses, which takes us back to this image here. Scholars have seen this as an important turning point in our socio-cultural conceptions of the fetus. Certainly before this time, before 1965, we couldn't image the fetus in quite this same way, with this degree of coloring and detail. But the idea of the fetus as an independent, disembodied actor is not a phenomenon of the last 50 years. The disassociation between a fetus and its pregnant female mother has been going on for a long time. So when I turned back to my research, I was looking into Galen. Now, Galen is probably the second most famous doctor of all time, next to Hippocrates, and he wrote this absolutely enormous collection of medical texts around the 2nd century CE. In fact, more than 10% of our extant Greek literature was written by Galen. And sure enough, he doesn't have very much to say about pregnant women or even about childbirth, but he was obsessed with the fetus. He wanted to know, what is the fetus? How does it form and develop? Is it alive? When does it first start being alive? And he wasn't alone either. Many other doctors and philosophers of the time period had similar questions. They wanted to know, does the fetus have a soul? When does the soul first enter the fetus? At conception? When it's born and takes its first breath? Porphyry, who was a Neoplatonist in the 3rd century, considered very carefully and came to the conclusion that the fetus was probably most similar to a plant, which makes a lot of sense if you consider that it's attached by a stalk to a dense bed of nutrients, cannot live if untethered from that stalk, needs oxygen but does not breathe, and has limited movement capabilities. So these sorts of questions were in the air. So what? People 2,000 years ago had the same sorts of questions about fetal life, or lack thereof, that we do now. Why does that matter? Well, doesn't it seem suspicious that we are still asking the same questions? Maybe instead of asking if and when the fetus is alive, we should be asking what the socio-cultural, political impact of childbearing is on women and their bodies. Let me give you one more example. There's a portion of the Hippocratic Oath that reads, "I will not give a woman an abortive pessary." And when the court case Roe v. Wade was being decided in the United States to determine whether or not women should have access to abortion, people said, well, we can't give women access to abortion because the Hippocratic Oath explicitly forbids it. And so they consulted a classics scholar who said, we should not take into account the Hippocratic Oath because this view right here was probably a minority viewpoint at the time that it was written. And I say, that's great because women have access to reproductive services in this country, but why is that the foundation for those services? Why not instead saying, we shouldn't even consider the Hippocratic Oath and its view on abortion because it was created within a cultural context that did not value women, their bodies, and their reproductive labor. As a classicist, I'm able to look over a span of 2,000 years, and I'm able to see that we are asking the same questions and having the same debates, and that if we ever want to come to different answers, we need to start asking different questions. Thank you very much.